Hello, everyone. This is Kenneth Halling back with another project. For this week, I've made a basic calculator program in the Erlang language because I wanted to, it's a new language to me. Haven't been very experienced with it in the past, so it's not as complicated as some of my last ones, but I am proud of what I've accomplished here. But anyway, just to go through what this code is doing real quick on a high level. Normally with Erlang is really good at message passing. But normally what you would do is you would export a lot of functions that you could then call into terminal down here. But I've only exported two, because what I've done is I've started a process, or I've given the program the capability to create a process that calls this loop function, which then will allow me to basically keep track of what's going on in this function because calculators usually have a history function so you can see some of the past calculations you've done, help keep track of that stuff. And that's what I've been doing here. Every time this loop history function, so this loop function is called, and you pass history the you pass the history you already have into it. Um, Up here, it's just a blank list. But the first time I call one of these functions, any of them, after all the stuff happens, whether it's subtract, multiply, divide, um, at the bottom here, I will be recursively calling the loop function again with an updated history. So it'll go back to this, and then it will listen for another message with the new history. So every single one of these functions has recursion going on into it until you get down to this function, which actually just stops the calculator. But so it's this really it's simple, but it was kind of hard to figure out how to get it to work right. Um, but recursion is a really cool way to get things uh, sort of repeating and looping. Um, but the well, let's actually see it in action here. For this, I have everything. I wasn't able to get Erlang or Rebar, which is a helper program for Erlang to work in PowerShell. So I'm using a WSL terminal here. If I call a Rebar 3 shell, it'll open up an Erlang shell where we can actually call functions that I've written here and actually interact with this program. So if I just configure everything, I like to do this first. You just configure everything to make sure everything that you've done recently and the changes you made have been saved, though it should automatically compile when you open the shell. And then now with this, the process is a something that I need to store in a variable. So, oh, can I get rid of this so that I can? There we go. So I'm going to store it in a variable called PID, which is, so I have to start it, call that start function, which will open up the loop and start the recursion in the calculator. And so that if you see this little bit of numbers like that, it means it worked. And now what I can do is this little exclamation mark means I'm sending a message to that process. And the messages are going to be set up like this. If you see in all these functions, you have the variables that you need to send. From is always going to be a self with parentheses. So, and then what you want to do is, let's say I'm going to subtract something here. You type in subtract, and then you give the number you want to subtract from, let's say 5, and the amount you want to subtract from it. So 4 here. So that's not spelled right. But there we go. So if I call that 5 minus 1 or 5 minus 4 is equal to 1, awesome. But another thing about Erlang that I want to show off here is the pattern matching capability. If you see these two functions take the same variables, except this top one recognizes when this Y slot is a 0, because then it won't let you divide by 0 and you won't get an error that will break your program. So if I um, So let me show you here. It does two different things, even though it's the function is set up exactly. The function is like named the same and set up the same. But 5 divided by 4, 1.5. 5 divided by 0, error divided by 0. And that error is actually saved to the history too. And so this is the whole, let me show off the whole reason I put this in the process in the first place is if you have, you can call this show history function and see everything you've done since the process was created because the history is recursively passed into each, back into the loop every time you call a function. So if I press show history and I enter that, you can see the subtraction we did, the division we did, and then the error that we did divided by 0. That error was stored in the history. It's not an error that was thrown because of the function. And then we can actually also clear the history, pass back an empty list into recursion and erase everything we have like that. And if we show history again, we see that there's no calculation history anymore. Finally, when we want to stop, we just type in stop with square brackets, no reason to call self here. Do it, calculator stopped. And there we go. That is my program. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in a couple weeks when I have a new project.